Welcome to the Axiom 2 post-FRR teleconference. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. If you are also monitoring the event video, please mute the audio on your TV or computer and listen only to audio from the phone. If you would like to ask a question during the Q&A portion of the briefing, please press star 1 to be added to the queue. If you would like to withdraw your question, press star 2. Do not use speakerphone when asking your question.
Central.
And at this time, you may begin.
And operator, this is the moderator. Just wanted to make sure I can get started here.
Yes, you can.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm NASA's Gary Jordan. Thank you for joining us remotely for today's teleconference. NASA, Axiom Space, and SpaceX have completed the flight readiness review for Axiom Mission 2, the second private astronaut mission to the International Space Station. Today we have representatives from NASA, Axiom Space, and SpaceX to discuss the outcomes of this important milestone. Joining our panel today is Ken Bowersox, NASA Associate Administrator for Space Operations, Joel Montalbano, NASA International Space Station Program Manager, Angela Hart, NASA Commercial Low Earth Orbit Development Program Manager, Derek Hossman, Axiom Space Chief of Mission Integration and Operations, and Bill Gerstenmaier, SpaceX Vice President of Build and Flight Reliability. We'll first start with some opening remarks from each of our briefers before taking questions. Questions will come in on our phone bridge. Please press star 1 to add your name to our queue and ask a question. Let's begin with initial remarks from Ken Bowersox. Ken.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us to spend a little time talking about the second private astronaut mission to the International Space Station. Today we had a review where we brought together members of the team from Axiom Space, SpaceX, and NASA to talk about the upcoming mission, and at the end of that review, the full team polled go. Axiom 1 was our first chance to fly a U.S. private astronaut mission. We learned a lot from that mission. We collected the lessons learned. We folded those back in and tried to benefit as much as possible from the first mission in preparing for this second mission. We'll learn even more from that, and we'll plow that back in to the missions that follow Axiom 2. These missions are very important to us at NASA as we try to open up space, low Earth orbit especially, to a greater cross-section of society. There's a lot to be done there, and we think that the economy in low Earth orbit will continue to expand, and someday NASA will just be a participant in that economy, buying services from private industry in low Earth orbit as NASA goes out and explores on the cutting edge. The space station is an incredibly busy place today with crew, cargo flights, lots of science. The schedule is really tight with all the missions launching from different parts of the world. And it was a real challenge for the team to find this 2-day window for the PAM mission, but I want everybody to know that the decisions that were taken were done very carefully, considering the safety of the crew and the important work that's being done every day on board the ISS. And now I'd like to pass it over to Joel Montalbano.
Thank you, Ken. And as Ken said, it's really good, and thank you guys for tuning in today. We had a great flight readiness review today where the team went over the mission overview. We briefed the rocket, the spacecraft, ops team readiness. We talked the mission overview, ISS status, and as Ken mentioned, the Axiom 1 lessons learned, and made sure that everything we learned on Axiom 1 that was relative to the Axiom 2 mission was incorporated by the teams. Ken mentioned the 2-day launch opportunity. So we're targeting May 21st at 5:37 Eastern for launch. That sets us up for a docking on May 22nd at 09:30 Eastern. The Axiom 2 crew will spend about 8 dock days on board the International Space Station. And as Ken said, these missions are pretty cool. They open us up to new students, new universities, new governments, new space agencies. This mission will have 20-plus experiments that they'll perform while they're docked to the International Space Station. And once this mission is complete, the ISS teams will focus on SpaceX 28. Right now we're targeting June 3rd for SpaceX 28, followed closely by the Boeing crewed test mission scheduled for July 21st, and then the SpaceX Crew 7 mission scheduled for later this summer. So thank you again for joining us, and with that, I'll hand it over to Angela.
Yeah, good afternoon, and again, thank you all for being here. It's great to have been part of this Flight Readiness Review and the second private astronaut mission to the ISS. The Commercial LEO Development Program supports private astronaut missions with others across the agency, particularly the International Space Station program, as part of our overall commercial LEO strategy, and we are all ready to support this mission. The AX-2 mission represents the continued progress that NASA and industry are making to build a robust commercial economy in low Earth orbit. The future we envision for low Earth orbit builds on the lessons from ISS along with these private astronaut missions and gets us closer to our goal of government and private astronauts working side by side on commercially owned and operated space stations in the future. Additionally, AX-2 builds upon the successes of AX-1, as was noted before, and further refines the NASA public-private partnerships with industry. The more we do these kinds of missions aboard the space station, the clearer the picture becomes of how NASA and industry will work together aboard commercial destinations. We recently signed an agreement with Axiom for the third private astronaut mission, and we're striving for a regular cadence of private astronaut missions through the life of the ISS to prepare for this future. We are looking forward to discussing more with you today, and thank you all for being here. With that, I'll toss it back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Angela. Appreciate it. Next up is Derek Hoffman. Derek.
Thanks, Gary, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for participating today and for your interest in this historic mission. As many of you know, AX-2 is the second in a series of missions to ISS that Axiom is undertaking. The goals of these missions, which we sometimes call precursor missions, are to build up, first, the Axiom internal operations capability, the tools, the processes, the trained flight controllers that are going to be required down the line to operate our Axiom station in the future. But additionally to that internal ops capability, it builds working relationships with NASA and with SpaceX so that when we eventually get to the point where we launch our first module, we'll have a solid capability in place that's based on these precursor missions that we've executed. For AX-2 in particular, there's several significant firsts that I would like to mention. It's the first female commander of a private space mission, Commander Peggy Whitson, who I know everybody's familiar with. She's the current record holder for longest time in space for an American astronaut, and her time on orbit for AX-2 will add to that record. And we're very, very pleased and very honored and very fortunate to have her commanding this mission. Additionally, this is the first mission with both private and government-sponsored astronauts. You may recall that the AX-1 mission was led by an Axiom commander, but the pilot and the two mission specialists were all private individuals. For this mission, the pilot, John Schaffner, is a private individual, but the other two astronauts are government-sponsored astronauts, and they're the government of Saudi Arabia. We have a male and a female astronaut, Ray and Ali, who are ready to go and very excited about the opportunity. And Ray will be the first female astronaut from Saudi Arabia, and combined, the two of them will be the first Saudi astronauts to visit the International Space Station. Ken and a couple of others have mentioned the lessons learned that we took away from AX-1, and we knew we would learn a lot on the mission, and we certainly did. One of the areas that we learned a lot about was how best to get the crew, the private astronaut crews, prepared to execute this very short but very intense time on orbit. Their training times are compressed, so it's very important that we make the most of the limited time that we have with them. So what we did is we got feedback from Mike L.A. and the rest of the AX-1 crew on what went well and what took time on orbit to learn, and we tried to focus on those things that took the most time on orbit that they had to master before they got proficient. So for this mission, we focused a lot more for example, on the docking day and the packing and the cargo configuration that has to happen on that day, because it's essential for that to go well, because it basically sets the tone for the rest of the mission. We also looked a lot at the software tools that the astronauts use on orbit to manage their day-to-day tasks, and we spent a lot more time familiarizing the Axiom crew with those software tools. So just the basics that you need to do your day-to-day tasks so that you don't have to learn those on orbit. So I'm happy to say that Axiom, both the crew and the flight control team, are very ready for the X2 mission, and we're looking forward to a successful launch on Sunday. And Gary, I'll hand it back to you.
Appreciate it, Derek. Thank you. All right, next we'll go over to Bill Gerstenmaier over at SpaceX. Bill, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Bill.
All right. Again, it's an honor to represent the SpaceX Dragon and Falcon teams. We've got the hardware ready to go fly. The Dragon vehicle is over in a hangar, waiting to be attached to the rocket. The rocket is ready to go fly. The pad is ready. We have dry dress and static fire ahead of us on Friday, and that all is on the plan and looks good as we're heading in that direction. We've got the crew fully trained. They're ready to go fly the Dragon capsule to the station, and then also ready for their return back to Earth. So again, we're all ready. We're ready to go do the activities. The teams are prepared. We've got a couple more things to go through and get things ready, but overall things are looking good, and it was a good review today to make sure the entire team is ready to go and ready to go fly. Again, we see crew missions as a really special mission for us. They're very different than the typical missions we fly. We learn a lot from each flight we fly on Falcon. We take those lessons to heart. We apply those back in, and it ends up with a more reliable vehicle to go take crews, our most precious cargo, to space. We look forward to your questions. Thanks.
All right, appreciate it, Bill. And thanks to all of our briefers for the initial remarks. We'll now open it up for questions. Again, if you're on the phone bridge, please press *1 to submit a question. And once your name is called, please state to whom you'd like to direct your question. We expect a lot of questions, so if you find that yours has already been answered, please press *2 to withdraw it. So let's open up the phone bridge, and let's start with Jonathan Seri from Fox News.
Thank you so much for taking my question. Wanted to ask you about potential backup launch dates if there's a scrub, and also what does the weather forecast look like for Sunday? Thank you.
See, this is Joel. I'll start, and others can answer. Right now, as we said, we're looking at May 21st and 22nd. If we don't get off by the 22nd, we'll stand down with the Axiom 2 mission and turn our focus to the SpaceX 28 mission. And then at that time, Axiom, NASA, and SpaceX will get together and look for the next best opportunity as we look at the mission that we have this summer, which is not only missions going to ISS, but other missions that use the pad facilities at Kennedy Space Center.
This is Bill Gerstenmaier. In terms of the weather, it's still a little bit early to predict the weather. You know, we're about 6 days out. I think we'll know a little bit better here in the next couple of days. There's some frontal activity moving through the Florida area. Again, the weather's pretty dynamic at this time of year in the spring, but we'll know in the next couple of days and get a better forecast and see where the models start converging and can make a more educated discussion about what the weather is. But right now, our job is to get the vehicles ready, to get the crew through their final training, make sure we're really ready to go fly, and then we'll deal with the weather when the weather comes to us.
All right, thank you both. Let's move on to Jeff Faust with Space News.
Good afternoon. Question probably for Derek. I think I heard mentioned that this is going to be spending 8 days at the ISS. I think you previously talked about a 10-day mission. Have you adjusted the timelines and content of the mission if you are, in fact, going to be spending a couple less days at the station than previously planned?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jeff. We did start out looking at 10 dock days on ISS, and in order to make the mission fit and fit in the flow of activities that ISS has lined up, we made the joint decision to reduce the dock time to 8 days. And, you know, we always prioritize all of our activities. And what we did in this case was lay out the priorities. We prioritized the payloads and the research and the science highest. And then we basically built an 8-day timeline So in the end, there was no impact to the research objectives. There was some media outreach and other things that we wanted to do but weren't a high priority that were dropped. But all the high priority objectives we were able to fit into this 8-day dock time frame.
Thanks for the question. Let's move on to Marcia Dunn, Associated Press.
Yes, hi. For Derek. Years ago, early on, Axiom gave a $55 million as the rough cost of a ticket for a mission like this, and is that still the going rate, more or less? Could you share how much each of your three customers are paying? And also, will any part of the space station be off limits for the Axiom crew? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start with the second question. We spent a lot of time based on AX1 lessons learned, with the AX2 crew, talking to them in specific details about what to touch, what not to touch, when to ask questions, and we've got a very specific list of things that they can do and they can't do, and things they should ask about. So we've been very specific about that. There are no areas that are off limits, but in general, the expectation is if they have questions, they'll start with Peggy and then ask their ISS crew counterparts on orbit. So relative to the cost question, I know that's an item of very great interest, but the cost to send humans and payloads to space is dynamic and complex. So I'm not prepared to talk about the specifics today.
All right, let's go to Marvin Marshall, Space Report News.
Hi, my name is Marvin Marshall from the Nighttime News Space Report. My question here is, for I believe Derek or William. I know you guys talked about some changes that that are on this mission compared to Axiom 1. Are there any that you can go into specifically, with the Dragon spacecraft and the crew mission plan that you've learned from the first mission? Thank you so much, and good luck on Axiom 2.
Yeah, from an ISS perspective, one of our big lessons learned was that first for docking day, there's a lot of activity on docking day. The crew has been up for a number of hours before they dock. There's spacecraft reconfiguration that has to happen on that day of undock before the crew goes to sleep. So it's a lot of activity very early in the mission that if both crews aren't ready to go execute, that it's very possible to get behind very early in the mission, which is clearly something we want to avoid. So we did spend a lot of time on docking day. We did a lot of dry runs on the cargo movement and specific roles and responsibilities for each of the Axiom crew members. So that was an area of focus on the ISS side. Additionally, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but all of the tools that the astronauts need to access procedures and products and so forth, like the electronic timeline, the tools that allow them to transfer photos and videos to the ground, the way that they interact and communicate with the ground. All those things, might seem on the surface easy and straightforward, but if you haven't done it before and you get to station, you can quickly get overwhelmed and, you can get behind a day or two. So a lot of the nuts and bolts of how the crew operates on orbit, we focused on as well. And I can't think of any significant changes to the Dragon spacecraft operations, but I'll defer to Bill Gerstenmaier on that one.
Yeah, we listened to the Axiom 1 crew after they returned and asked them if there were any things in the Dragon that surprised them or things that they could have maybe needed some more training on. And some of the things were just general noises that the spacecraft make, things like when the umbilical disconnects during reentry. There were some things that were a little bit different to them, so we made sure that this Axiom 2 crew got familiar with those activities so there wouldn't be surprises to them with normal vehicle noises that vehicle makes as we load propellant in and as the vehicle returns and parachutes get deployed, et cetera. So we went through a little bit of extra training with them to make sure they were extra comfortable in operations of Dragon and know what to expect. The other thing you'll see on this mission is there'll be a return to landing site of the first stage boosters, so we'll come back and land on the land instead of out on a drone ship. That's a little bit different than before. It makes no difference at all to the crew. The basic timeline for the crew is the same. MECO's a few seconds different. That's main engine cutoff's a little bit different, about 8 seconds, but it's not a big deal one way or the other. So there's no impact to us, and that was made available because we have a little bit of extra Falcon performance. So it's advantageous to get the first stage back to the landing site, because then we don't have to worry about recovery weather in the drone ship. We don't have to worry about having the drone ship positioned, et cetera. So it's an advantage to us overall from a launch availability standpoint. We see that as a way we're continuing to improve things, make it safer for the crew, and overall give them a better experience as they fly to space.
All right, thanks for the question. Let's move on to Andrea Leinfelder, Houston Chronicle.
Hi, thank you. These questions are for Derek. I just was hoping to get a little more detail on the training from AX1 that will help with AX2. For instance, you were saying spacecraft reconfiguration. Is that basically to make room for the crew to sleep? And what is cargo configuration? Like, what exactly is that? Thank you.
Yeah, so when the Dragon spacecraft docks to ISS and they open the hatch and the Axiom crew ingresses ISS, there's a standard welcome ceremony, but then they immediately get to work. There's things that have to be done to the Dragon spacecraft to configure it basically for a quiescent state, so that it's ready for any kind of emergencies that might occur while docked to ISS. So basically, you're putting the Dragon in a configuration that it will be in for the next 7 or 8 days. And there's also cargo that needs to be moved from the Dragon to the ISS early in the mission just to get set up.
All right, let's move to Richard Tribeau, Orlando Sentinel.
Hi, yes, thanks for taking my question. This, I think, would be for Angela or Derek. This is the next mission that's been, I think I read it go as early as November, and possibility, and if not, what's the target for that? And then down the line, when will a potential fourth mission to the ISS, whether it be Axiom or some other competitor, be open and awarded? And that's my question. Thanks.
So for the Axiom 3 mission that I talked about earlier, we will be working on that best launch date. I'll let Joel go into that into more detail after I answer your other question. And we have target dates, but we obviously want to get AX2 off and successful mission, and then we'll be finalizing that. Again, I'll let Joel speak to that in a moment. For the next private astronaut mission, we did put out a solicitation for a PAM4. We're still evaluating that, and we hope to make some decisions on that in the next month or two, and so you should be hearing something about it, the next mission in the future.
And let's see, as far as launch dates, we're not ready to give out an Axiom 3 launch date yet. We have a number of missions, as I mentioned, this summer and in early fall. Kind of wanted to lay all that out. And then as we get past this initial couple missions with Axiom 2 and SpaceX 28, we'll be in a better position to give you a realistic time for Axiom 3. Our goal, our long-term goal, is to get 2 private astronaut missions a year. That's our long-term goal. It's something that we're working on together as an agency across the different programs, but we'll see. Right now, you have to look at the missions kind of at the tactical time frame, and that'll dictate where Axiom 3 goes.
All right, next is Gina Sinceri, ABC News.
Given the international nature of this crew, any special events planned in Saudi Arabia during this mission?
Yeah, as you would expect, this is a huge event in Saudi Arabia, and I know during the time they're docked to ISS, there's a whole series of media events scheduled. I know one of the focuses of many of these events is interacting with school-age children in Saudi Arabia, and that was one of the reasons, just the timing of the school year that we were very interested in getting this flight done in May. It was one of the significant advantages to getting it done in May. But And then I know they have a whole series of post-flight events planned as well. So, yeah, there's just tremendous visibility and excitement in Saudi Arabia relative to their astronauts in the X2 mission.
All right, let's go to Mark Carreau, Aviation Week.
Thank you very much. I think I'm kind of following up on the question that Jeff Faust asked earlier. Is the total mission duration changed as well as the 10 days to 8 days on the station?
Yes. So the mission is shorter 2 dock days. So, if you had 8 days, you have a day for launch and a day for landing. That'll give you 10, and we were at, say, 12.
Thank you.
Okay, next is David Denault, About Space Today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the call. My question, Derek, Axiom Space is beginning to be a little better known, but I'm kind of interested, like a lot of folks, what's your projection on launching your first module? Hello?
Yes. So our projection for our first module, which is we refer to the HAB 1 module today, is late 2025. Basically, fourth quarter 2025.
Mm-hmm. It's a follow-up. Right. We get a follow-up. Will you be sending crew to that eventually?
Yes. Our plan today is to have an Axiom crew on board either just prior to the arrival of HAB 1 or just after the arrival of HAB 1, and that Axiom crew would do typical outfitting activities, the activation and outfitting of the Axiom module.
Thanks for the question. Next is Will Robinson-Smith from Spectrum News 13.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time to answer the question. I suppose this is for Joel and Bill Gerstmeyer. So hoping you give us an update on where things stand on the construction and future operations of the cargo and crew launch tower at Pad 40. I know in a previous teleconference, the time frame was looking like potential for launch from there, looking for a cargo mission maybe by the end of calendar year 23. Wanted to see if that was still within the cards or if that's a little bit farther off in the future. Thanks.
This is Bill Gerstenmaier. We started construction of the tower out at Pad 40, and we're still on track for having the ability to support launches towards the end of this year, the end of 2023.
All right, thanks, Bill. Next is Marcia Smith, Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much for taking my question. One is a near-term question about this particular launch and what happens if they get delayed returning the way Axiom 1 did. I think they were up an extra 4 or 5 days. And considering how busy the schedule is, did you allow a certain number of days for them to be delayed in departing the space station? And more broadly, I understand it's your goal to have 2 private astronaut launches per year, but it does seem as though you're getting to have quite a bit of a traffic jam up there. So is that realistic? And how will it change once the Axiom modules start getting up there? Will that make it better? Is there more docking ports?
Yeah, so I'll hit both of them, then others can add to that. So when I looked at the summer, when I looked at the Axiom 2 mission, the SpaceX 28 cargo mission, and the CFT mission, I tried to come up with enough margin that would cover launch delays or processing delays or weather delays. And so we looked at about a 2-week process. So if Axiom 2 undocking gets delayed, we'll slip the cargo mission 28 a few days to the right, and we have that margin such that we can slip that mission, still get our main objectives done, and then be prepared to support the CFT mission in July. And then as far as, 2 two PAM missions. The team, that's the goal that we gave the team, to get the two PAM missions a year. Once the module gets there, we would drop that down to one PAM mission a year. But, that's two is our goal right now, and that's what we're working on.
All right, let's go to Stephen Clark, Spaceflight Now.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I think mine's a follow-up for Gerst. You mentioned the first stage for this mission will be returning to the launch site for landing instead of a drone ship landing. And you mentioned there's some extra performance involved in this mission. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about what that extra performance is, where it's coming from, and is this going to be standard for every crew launch going forward?
It'll be standard for every crew launch going forward is our plan. And the performance really comes from using the same systems we've been using before, and we've been able on Starlink missions to show that we have extra capability available for us to go ahead and utilize for this mission. We've always had this kind of capability before. We just weren't sure that we would always get the performance, but the number of Falcon flights we've flown have allowed us to say that performance is available and can be used where it's needed to be used moving forward. So with that, I think we're ready to go do this. We see the enhancement side of this. We see the better pieces moving forward.
And if I could follow up.
Thank you, Bill. Let's go back to Andrea Leinfelder, Houston Chronicle.
Hi, I have another question for Derek. Government astronauts are a big part of your business plan. So how important is it for this mission to go well for, the future of these missions to ISS and to Axiom Station as you, kind of show off this mission to other governments? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Government astronauts are indeed a key piece of our business plan. Early in the program, it wasn't clear to us what the balance would be between private individuals and government astronauts, since nothing like this had ever been done before. But it's become clear to us that the government astronaut market is key, and we're pursuing that actively. I have complete confidence that we've got the crew ready to go. They're well trained, they're excited, and they're looking forward to the mission. And I think it's going to be a demonstration for other countries and perhaps those on the fence about whether it's worth it or whether it's doable. I think the success of this mission will make it clear to them that it's something available to them as well, and hopefully just kind of take off as a market.
Thank you. Next is Micah Maidenberg, Wall Street Journal.
Yes, hello. Just a quick question for Bill. How many Falcon 9 boosters does SpaceX have available for missions right now? And would you expect that number to change over the course of 2023, perhaps by the end of the year, given the flight rate goal, the company has set out? Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number of boosters that we have available, but we're able to fly our manifest pretty straightforward. We're in the process of certifying for Starlink missions booster reflights up to 20 times, and that gives us a lot of capability to continue to reuse boosters and continue to keep flying. So, again, I think we are able to meet our manifest plus some with the boosters we've got in work, and we're kicking up a little bit some of our Stage 1 production here, a little bit to support some of our heavy missions. We have a couple of Falcon Heavy missions, and those are typically expendable, so we need to have boosters ready for those. But we think we have plenty of boosters ready to go fly. This is nice in the fact that this is a new booster, a first flight booster that we're going to fly here to have booster 1080, and it'll be good to see it into service, and we expect it to have a long lifetime and serve multiple missions in the future.
Thanks for the question. Let's go to Marcia Dunn with Associated Press.
Yes, hi again. Derek, you mentioned that the crew knows what they can touch, what they can't, and when to ask questions. Could you give an example of each, please? what is something harmless they don't have to ask permission to touch first? What should they not be touching? And give an example of when they should stop and pause and ask a question. Thanks.
Yeah, one of the things, there are the things you might expect, Marcia. For example, they've got for the galley and the potty, both essential functions, obviously. They've got a tremendous amount of training that they've done on the ground, but on orbit, once they reach ISS, the first time they use each of these things, first time they prepare their meals in the galley, but before they use the toilet for the first time, they're going to get a brief from the ISS crew. So maybe that's something in the middle. They're very well trained on it. They understand that they can use it as necessary, but first time use, they're going to get educated by the ISS crew. As an example, on the Russian segment, they're free to move back and forth just based on invitations from the Russian crew. And then once on the Russian segment, they get guidance from the Russian crew as to what they can touch and not touch. One area specifically that is restricted is the airlock because of the Class 1 hardware and the delicate nature of the EVA hardware. So that's an example of an area where they don't have a need to go and they've been told to avoid in general.
All right, and just a reminder to press *1 to enter into our queue. With that, we'll go to the last question currently in our queue. Ken Kramer, Space Up Close.
Hey, thank you for doing this. Thanks for taking my question. I think for Joel, I'd like to ask a question. The Soyuz that returned, that was crippled. The last briefing, you didn't have all the information on the temperature that was achieved inside on the return. I wonder if you could fill us in on that in some detail, please. And is the Starliner mission on track for July 21? Thanks.
All right, thanks, Ken. Hey, yeah, we'll take just one question on that subject and then turn the focus back to the Axiom mission. But there was some reports that the temperatures were high at the landing, but I can tell you that was incorrect. When they did the temperature of the capsule, that it was in the high 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, that was without crew, and so the team is still putting together a timeline of what it would look like with crew. But there was some reports that it was very high, over 100 degrees, and that was incorrect information.
Incorrect.
Incorrect. And then as far as the Boeing mission on schedule for July 21st, we have a number of milestones in front of us in the June timeframe, but right now, July 21st.
Thank you.
All right, very good. And again, *1 to enter into the queue. We did have one more come in. David Curley, Discovery Channel.
Thanks very much. Gerst, can you talk to us big picture about what you see as the future of PAMs versus NASA missions, low Earth orbit versus deep space exploration? Just give us a sense of a guy who's worked both sides of this, of what you think.
This is a pretty exciting time in space. I think this Axiom 2 mission shows that there's a lot of commercial interest in spaceflight activities, and I think we feel really lucky on the SpaceX side to be able to support this activity moving forward. I think as there's more and more interest in space, and we show that space is now accessible to more of the general population than has been in the past, I think that really bodes well for human spaceflight moving forward. I think this is a unique opportunity and a unique time frame where ordinary folks can get a chance to go to space and do some pretty amazing things. And I think as more and more people go to space and they can bring back and share their vision of what they've seen, share their experience, I think you'll see this commercial spaceflight activity and human spaceflight activity grow. And this is neat to see this beginnings start, to see how this moves forward. I think it's neat to see it in the Axiom flights. We have the Polaris flights that are coming up. We'll do a spacewalk on that, which is, again, pushing the envelope a little bit. We did the cupola mission with the Polaris team. So I think this is a very interesting time in human spaceflight where it's not just a government-only kind of activity. It can be actually accommodated by other governments. We can facilitate things, and we're really starting to see the beginnings of the commercial space industry start to open up for humans in space.
All right, thank you, Bill. And we'll go to one final question back to Will Robinson-Smith with Spectrum News 13.
Thank you for taking a second question. Sort of in line with David's last one, but directed toward Derek. As these PAM missions continue to roll on, in what way are you and the Axiom team really kind of hoping to really push the envelope on the possibilities and potentials for them? And Joel, if you wouldn't mind answering that as well too. Thank you.
Well, certainly one of the things that we're advancing on and getting better at internal to Axiom in collaboration with our customers is just identifying cutting-edge science that's available to do. And the more we work with the countries and the more we work with more of the scientists out there, I think each mission you're going to see a more extensive selection of payloads in science. I don't know that we'll necessarily push the envelope over the next several missions, but I certainly think we'll advance the data available in the story. And internally, one thing we're doing as an example, I didn't mention before, but for the AX-1 mission, our flight control team was resident in the Mission Control Center on site at the Johnson Space Center. For this mission, we've stood up our own Axiom Mission Control Center. It's resident in the Axiom headquarter building. It's just right out the back gate of JSC, but it's a significant advancement in terms of standalone operations. And then the other thing that is actually pushing the envelope is how we handle commercial activities on orbit. And that's something that we're working closely with NASA on to understand what's possible and what's feasible now, and then how we might open up the possibilities in the future.
And let's see, I'll add a little bit and emphasize, and then Angela should say a couple words too. The new customers, and so the fact that we have the Saudi Arabian government astronauts, that's pretty cool, right? Our job is to expand what we do in low Earth orbit across the globe, and anything we can do to accelerate that expansion, I think, is worthwhile, and it's a big goal for us. Additional science activities, having these crew members on board doing science and adding to the complement that's already done in low Earth orbit is huge, right? And so anytime you can increase that, increase the outreach that's happening on board and use this great asset we have, those are all excellent examples and things that we can do with these private astronaut missions. And let me hand it over to Angela and let her, as the manager of the organization, say a couple words.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. As everybody's already mentioned, this is a super exciting time, and every time we do one of these missions, we learn something else. Derek's already mentioned commercial activities. We're trying to understand what's the right level of those activities on station, but then what does that mean in a commercial environment down the road that has NASA government astronauts participating in. We will continue to work private astronaut missions, as noted. We also are doing a lot of things through the commercial aspects of the ISS National Lab, and more commercial partners are coming in through that avenue to bring in science and tech demos to ISS that will support commercial LEO destinations and other aspects of the commercial LEO economy. We're also trying to understand other ways, any and every other way that we can use the ISS to benefit our commercial industry as they move forward to take over the role of potential commercial space stations in the future. And so we expect future tech demos from other CLD partners, as well as continued tech demos from Axiom as they go and develop the systems that they plan to use for their commercial elements. And so I think you're going to see this growing and more opportunities and aspects as we move forward to this future of a commercial LEO economy and commercial space stations that we will all be able to benefit from in the future.
All right, we did get one more in the queue, so I'll pass it over to Jim Siegel, NASATech.net.
Thank you for taking my question, and I apologize I came in a little bit late, so maybe you've already covered this, but I'm interested in when we will start seeing other low Earth orbit space stations be put into place, and what companies will there be that will position these space stations, and will NASA be a part of these decisions to do that, or will the commercial companies be doing that by themselves on their own? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. From an Axiom perspective, our plan today is to launch our first element, our Habitation 1 module, in the fourth quarter of 2025, and that module, of course, will attach to the ISS, and then we'll gradually build up our modules with a second HAB module and then additional modules from 2025 to 2030. So that would be the initial offering from a purely Axiom perspective.
Okay,
as a NASA perspective, I think we talked in the past, we have made a number of awards in the area of commercial LEO destinations. We have the Axiom commercial element and destination on ISS that we've talked about a bunch here today. We have the 3 other commercial LEO destination funded SpaceX agreements that we're working with those companies as they move forward in their development for commercial destinations. There are also a number of other private companies that are working toward commercial destinations, some who have reached out to NASA, some that are off working on their own. We are currently in blackout on a commercial space capability solicitation that is out for review right now that did open up opportunities in that area as well, and so we may see some additional awards in that area when that closes out. So I think there are a number of aspects where NASA is engaged, some where we're just on the very periphery, some that we are very, very closely engaged with those companies, and I expect those that are in the periphery will continue to move forward and reach out to NASA as we move the bar on getting closer to commercial destinations. As you've seen in the press before, it is NASA's goal to make an award for services for commercial LEO destinations in the 2026 timeframe, with the ability to have NASA crew on board and no gap prior to ISS end of life. So that's our long-term schedule, but lots of folks are working things even sooner than that, which is great. We'd love to see things up there earlier, that we can see time on orbit and lots of lessons that they'll learn as well as we will, just like we are here on these PAMs. So it's going to be a very exciting next couple of years as we move in that direction.
Thank you.
All right, with that, thanks to all who submitted the questions, and thanks to today's briefers for taking the time to discuss this upcoming mission. NASA and Axiom Space issued advisories that lay out additional media opportunities this week, as well as our joint coverage plans with SpaceX. You can reference those at nasa.gov and axiomspace.com, but for now, I'll actually turn it over to Derek to talk about some of these near-term opportunities.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I just wanted to say thanks again. I very much appreciate the interest and the participation today and the opportunity to talk about what will be a very exciting mission. And I'll tell you that there will be an AX2 virtual press conference tomorrow, Tuesday, May 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern. And this will be, again, a virtual conference. It'll be conducted from the quarantine facilities in Florida. And this will be the first opportunity to interact and ask questions of the entire AX2 crew, So Peggy, John, Ali, and Rihanna will all be participating on this event, and it'll be live streamed on axiomspace.com.
Appreciate that, Derek. Thanks again to all who joined us today. That'll wrap up today's briefing.
Thank you for participating in today's conference. All lines may disconnect at this time.